So it turns out that the principled warriors in Columbia University were only principled so long as their violence wasn't met with any defense of their victims and any law enforcement. The law is now being enforced a little bit in Columbia, so Columbia finally let the police do their job. Students were arrested. Many students were arrested, taken away from the building that they are occupying. They're going to face repercussions with in terms of their future as students. Those of them who are students, which we're not clear about how many actually are, but many are. And Columbia has asked the police to remain on campus for a while. Welcome to the Daily Objective, day 208 of the war in Israel. And of course, the campus intifada seems to be ending because when you meet terrorists with force, they break and you win. So maybe this is a lesson for Israel. Maybe this is a lesson for the United States of America. And for anybody in the world who actually doesn't fully want to support terrorists. Uh, James, your initial thoughts before we see some of the nicer videos that we've seen in recent weeks.
Well, I must say it was pleasant to see the police finally allowed to do their job at Columbia University last night. But frankly, over the last fortnight, more than 2 weeks had been going by where President Shafiq had kept giving them deadlines. Oh, no, another 48 hours. And then that would pass. Oh, no, you have to take them down in 48 hours. You're breaking the school rules. Then that would pass. And she wouldn't do anything. And it got worse and worse. The threats, the intimidation got worse and worse until finally, because she wouldn't do anything, they broke windows, took over Hamilton Hall, they apparently forcibly detained 3 janitors there. They used human chains to push out students, Jewish and non-Jewish students, out of Hamilton Hall. They were swarming into the other buildings. That was all caused by her sanctioning for over 2 weeks what has been going on at Columbia. Her failure to address not only Columbia University's breaking of their rules on campus, which were being broken all over the place, as she was announcing at the time, but state and local law against trespass, burglary, vandalism, threats. All of that kind of stuff is criminal. No, look, Columbia is private property, right? But if I have private property, does that mean that people who I invite on can get murdered and raped, and I have to wait for the police to get invited in before the police to do something? No. You get vandalism, when you get threats, when you get burglary, the New York Police Department should never have waited, frankly, for the president to say, come in. Victims, students, customers of Columbia were being threatened and intimidated, and you shouldn't have to wait for the windows to get broken, but they did. They sanctioned it to the point where windows got broken, things got taken over. Finally, though, in a brave move, and when you let the police, but the other side of it, though, is when you let the police do their job, they can do it, and they did it effectively, and they did it without any significant injuries. They went in at a very brave move in the second story of Hamilton Hall, one by one in through this window, in a kind of daring move. And they went in, they neutralized the situation, they got the bad actors out. Now, that was mostly to the good, although it should never have happened in the first place. Violence still breaks out in other places. Up in Harlem, flares are thrown, there's still violence, there's more arrests. NYU, there was still more violence, but the police in New York at least contained things last night. That yes, more than 300 arrests. More than 300 arrests occurred in New York City last night. Now, New York City with its new, New York State with its new bail laws, of course, these are misdemeanors, and so it's a revolving door. These people are out of jail probably already, even if they were arrested. But the point is, at least the encampments were broken up, and New York City is a safer place for students to engage in learning. At least they can engage in learning. Remember what had happened. They'd gotten to the point where they'd closed the campus to anyone who didn't live there. They told all Jewish students that they had to do the rest of the term by Zoom or something. So Jewish students weren't getting in-class instruction for the rest of the term. Non-resident students were told to stay off campus. This meant that Jewish and non-student Jewish and non-Jewish students were being their right to the education they paid for was being taken away from them by these thugs. And it got to that point. It should never have gotten to that point, frankly. Now, across the country, of course, this is a national thing. We are looking at literally hundreds of university and college campuses from coast to coast that have been affected, and there has been a wide variety of different responses by both the universities and the state and local governments. At Tulane, in Florida, in Texas, I think they're doing a much better job of letting the police come in and put down this. Not perfect in my view, but at least they're doing a better job. The senator from Texas this morning said that at the University of Texas, Austin, for example, half of the people arrested there were outside agitators. I know there are outside agitators. There's no doubt. As I indicated in the last TDO we were together, the signs are all the same, pre-printed. These expensive tents are all the same from coast to coast on these campuses. There obviously is some funding, organization, but I think that the focus on that, and that is what the focus in New York was when Mayor Adams and the police chief had a press conference yesterday before they cracked down, and then a press conference again today. They're putting all the emphasis on these outside agitators as if it's all outside agitators that are responsible. But no, we have seen professors, we have footage, we've seen professors involved in this. We've seen professors supporting this. We had the 100 Columbia professors who basically took Hamas's side already in a petition. The professors should not be let off the hook. Why is it at universities? Why is it all happening? Because universities are ground zero for where these ideas are coming from. And it's coming from the professors, and it's coming from the students. And if there weren't a lot of students involved in this, it wouldn't have focused on the universities. One last thought. The variety that I spoke of the different reactions is really despicable, because you have better reactions in Texas, Louisiana, Florida, perhaps. The reaction in Colombia, which sort of allowed it to fester and to get to that point. But what I find particularly repulsive are Northwestern University and Brown. They are negotiating with these pro-Hamas thugs, saying at Northwestern, for example, well, we want to have 5 Palestinian students on full scholarship. We want 2 Palestinian scholars to allow me to teach for the next 2 years. We want to look at Brown. They're going to do an investigation into whether or not Brown should utterly divest from Israel. Now, that is total capitulation. That is only going to encourage more of these demonstrations and more violence. So what we're seeing is a wide spectrum, depending on the state and local governments involved and the university administrations involved. But some are absolutely despicable. They're negotiating with the pro-Hamas thugs, guaranteeing Palestinian Gazan scholars and students be allowed to get an American education. Outrageous. And then you've got the better reactions like at Tulane and in Texas. But of course, how long did it take President Shafiq? She was sitting there. She knew violations of law were happening, and she wasn't inviting in the police. She was letting it fester and fester, and the local government was saying, we won't go in until she invites us in. It is true that some of this requires the owner. Columbia's private property. And a trespass, for example, isn't really a trespass until the owner says they don't have my permission to be here. So in that sense, I can understand the New York City police saying, well, we're waiting for that. But once crimes start happening, and the threats that are happening, I mean, when windows get broken, when buildings get taken over, they even realized at that point, this is clearly not free speech. And that's what this all, as I say, comes down to. A total confusion about what free speech and peaceable assembly means in this country.
In the UK, years ago, there was a feminist columnist who wrote a column about how there are not enough women thinkers in the A levels, which is the equivalent of high school politics curriculum. And so as part of that, one of the thinkers who was added was Ayn Rand. which I'm sure that feminist columnist, that's not what she intended. And so my first thought is when scholarships are given to Palestinians, maybe you can find Palestinians who would actually be pro-Israel, although we haven't found any yet. We're told there are innocent Palestinians somewhere out there. We are, our best investigative journalists are out there looking for them.
We'll dig
But
one up.
something else.
Well, the son of that Hamas founder is the
Yes,
closest
yes,
found. But
we did
otherwise,
find
I
it.
can't detect
Yeah.
anyone on the ground in Gaza who actually opposes Hamas.
Yeah, but there's I had a conversation also many years ago with this anarchist or anarcho-capitalist as he called himself, and we were talking about property in his ideal anarchist system, and he was saying, well, you can shoot trespassers, which of course in some situations is a good idea, but in his ideal world is be like I own a street. I put a sign, trespassers will be shot, and then I can shoot you. So I asked, but there's no state, so you don't actually have to put a sign. So I might actually, without knowing, I might actually end up on your property, and then you can shoot me. And he
Oh,
said, yes. So,
right. There
that's
are libertarians who think you should be able to have a nuclear bomb in your
yeah,
backyard.
yeah. So
These guys are
so
crazy. Or deadly booby traps in the walk up to your front door. Of
yeah.
course,
So
that's insanity.
in contrast, the university, yeah, is private property, but where you have contracts. The students are paying tuition. There's a contract there. They're paying tuition for a reason. They're there for a reason. Part of it is they are allowed in libraries. They're allowed to go to class. They're allowed to move from point A to point B within the university, and that contract was violated. So, of course,
Totally violated.
it was
Both
violently
Christian
violated.
and Jewish students, by the way, who were not allowed to study for finals, not allowed to get on campus if you didn't live there. If you were Jewish, you were told specifically to stay away and do your classes on Zoom for the rest of the term. And at least now Columbia will have New York City Police Department presence there until through even a couple of days after graduation. Through the complete end of the next term, NYPD will be there. But look what's going on in LA. I mean, my God.
Yeah,
I went to NYU. My
we're
dad.
actually gonna get to that on the reality show, which is gonna be all about UCLA. Although if we have time at the end, James, I know you want to comment on it as well. Thank you, Jonathan, for the super chat. Thank you, Johnny. Thank you, Bonnie. Thank you, Wes, and thank you, Stephen, for all your super chats. Should we watch a clip?
Let's.
All right. Let's watch a clip of some of what happened in Colombia. It's interesting how when there's dozens or hundreds of anti-Semites and one Jew, the anti-Semites are very proud to hold their hands together and block the Jew from entering campus. And when it's one of them against the police, he seemed surprised that attacking the police will have a different result than when he and his anti-Semitic mob attack a Jew
but,
who's alone, and it's
but that is
not exactly.
precisely, that's exactly the kind of violence, and it is violence, and they don't, and even our media, much less academics, don't recognize as violence these like human chains. One of the things I know, right, you're going to talk about UCLA. One of the things that set off, I saw footage yesterday of a Jewish student being blocked from his normal business on UCLA. He's just trying to walk over to Royce Hall in UCLA, and a Jewish student is being stopped by a chain. There have been here reports at University of Wisconsin-Madison of similar things, reports at various other universities where where anyone who is perceived as a Zionist, there's a human chain they put in front of them to block their ability to get through, as they're probably chanting Zionists should die. Again, the things that are being said, worldwide intifada, we want 1948 back. When they say river to the sea, they really know what it means. They are calling for the extermination of Israel and 6 to 8 million people in the Middle East. That is in effect what they're arguing for. When they call for worldwide intifada. As I say, they don't even know probably historically what intifada means and what the last intifada meant and how suicide bombers were slaughtering children in that. They have no clue what that means. But they're chanting from the river to the sea, we want 1948 back. It's clear what they want: the destruction of Israel. These are pro-Hamas. They say, we are Hamas. Uh, that is an overt threat to every Zionist, every Jewish student on campus, and should be treated as such.
Yeah, Frank mentions that that is Eli Cives. Is that the student that we've shown as well? There's this one student in UCLA who is a real hero. We're going to see him on the reality. Not going to see him. We're going to see videos of him on the reality show. Though, if we can get him, maybe we should try for an interview at some point. But yeah, he really is. He's exposing these people for who they are by just wanting to walk from point A to point B. That's if I'm getting it right, Frank. This is the guy who spoke to that Greek professor, and she started defining genocide and then got stuck somewhere. And then he asked, "Well, how is the population growing?" And then she looked around and asked for people to help her, and that was a great clip.
It was a
Yeah,
great clip.
somebody being a professor does not make them actually all-knowing or intelligent. Apparently, intelligence is not a prerequisite. There was a question here that I wanted to answer, and I now can't find it, but it was, oh, there it is. Fencer Rose asked a question for James, and it's Razi, but I'll let that slide. Do you support the possible immigration of the Palestinians to the U.S.? This is in reference to Biden
Right.
saying that he might accept some Palestinian refugees. Uh,
Unbelievable. My answer is clear and unequivocal: no. You know what he was doing, and they were really asking President Biden and the people at the State Department. So, what you're suggesting is letting Palestinians just en masse migrate with a path to citizenship, mind you, to the United States. And they were asking, you mean something more than American citizens living in Gaza? You mean something more than international people who are trapped there or something? Or Christians in Gaza? Yes, all Palestinians in Gaza, apparently, they're considering letting in large numbers into the United States. And my answer is no. I am a fierce advocate of the freedom of peaceful, civilized people to migrate. This is one of the reasons why I'm in favor of the United States as such, and the state of Israel, by the way. When peaceful, civilized people migrate, it is their right. It is the right of the people in those countries to invite them in and employ them in whatever. When they are, however, violent terrorists of this kind, you have an absolute right to keep them out. And we now know with great clarity what the Gazan population is all about. And I am very much opposed to letting America be a place where Egyptians and Jordanians who have refused to let these people in to come in and ruin my country. Thank you very much.
So here's where we slightly disagree, and this is where I support Palestinians also being allowed to emigrate or into Israel and with a path to citizenship, and that is when they are actively giving information about terrorists. If
Oh,
they are actually, but this is of course not what Biden is talking about.
no,
Like
no. If
that
they're
is that
willing
is the
to
one
turn on
path to
their
citizenship
Hamas
that you have.
leaders, then yes, we should embrace them, use them, reward them if they're helping us. But yeah, I agree with you, Razi. That's true. And not all Palestinians are the same. I know that. There must be some comparatively, I mean, but it's just that we don't see great numbers of it. What we see is an overwhelming support, celebrations in the street, civilian Gazans participating in October 7th. We do not see an anti Hamas resistance. No, 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 no. Gaza and the people there must be treated as enemies. This includes the civilian population, ladies and gentlemen, just as we do in any other war. After World War II, when America took control of Bavaria, that we had to separate out the Nazis from the non-Nazis, and
Yeah,
that is absolutely crucial.
if America wants to help out in this sense, what they can do is put pressure on their Arab so-called allies to take in Palestinians. Of course, if there is a path to peace in the Middle East, it does involve much of the population in Gaza and the West Bank no longer staying there. That is
Well,
my
that is
opinion
true.
that I've
Yeah.
expressed here in the past. Thank you, Mark Goodkin, for the super chat. Mark says, "Thanks for keeping us up to date on these riots. A15 seems to be the main organizer of the protests around the USA. James, are you familiar with A15?"
Well, no, not particularly with A15, but what we do have is some information. We're still doing this, and there should be congressional investigations, obviously, that get to the bottom of this. Something we've discussed. We do need to get to the bottom of this. Some of the money does, the Palestinians for, that group. That's really just a front organization that has been taking money from some money, I guess, over $100,000 from the Rockefeller Foundation, money from the Ford Foundation, perhaps, but certainly Soros money. It's unclear where it's all coming from, but appears to be multiple sources. So yeah, there are absolutely left-wing organizations that need to be exposed for their involvement in this horrific incident of threats and violence on American college campuses. Uh, it's not. The thing is, I remember there were left-wing people when on TV when the Golden Gate Bridge and Brooklyn Bridge were being shut down, what is it, a month ago now, saying, oh, don't make a big deal of this. This is no big deal. And now look at what's happened all over these college campuses. And you know something, both the left and the right are, however, are challenged on this. If they can't define what free speech and peaceful assembly is, if the right thinks January 6th is peaceful assembly. If the left thinks that those 2020 riots across the country after George Floyd were, quote, mostly peaceful protests, then let me suggest that neither the left nor the right have a clue as to what free speech really involves. It's communication with words. It's
Um,
not blocking people, violating their rights,
yeah.
trespassing, etc.
So I want to get to the next super chat and to get to what was originally going to be the topic of today's episode in the last few minutes we have left. But Daniel sent me a link to A15's website. I'm just going to read the headline is Coordinated Economic Blockade to Free Palestine. A15 refers to April 15th. It says the global economy is complicit in genocide, join participating cities in blocking the arteries of capitalism and jamming the wheels of production. I love it when they throw capitalism in there.
Oh yeah, lovely
Thank
Marxist
you,
takes there. Thank you for that. Yeah.
thank you, Moo Joe, for the super chat. As capitalists, we also love our super chats. Uh, Moo Joe says madness and the fact that these are mostly immigrants that we saved slash escaped vile cultures and now have the audacity to do that to others. I don't know that that's mostly immigrants. It's definitely much of it is there is outside influence, there is Qatari influence, and that is where the state does come in and say, look, maybe these countries aren't our friends. That's the first thing you should say, and maybe dictatorships shouldn't be allowed to influence, shouldn't be allowed to do basically propaganda within our countries.
Why
But
the hell do we let Qatar fund our universities? Why the hell do we let China fund our universities? Of course, they're going to be promoting ideas that are friendly to them. But of course, I don't want to let these. Remember, we've got professors here who were, muttering their mutilated Marxism back in 2020, defending violence and calling it mostly peaceful protests. We need to have a re-examination of what academic freedom and free speech really means. It cannot involve the right to violate other people's rights. Full stop. Schools are the focus here because guess what? The professors are unusually awful about their ideas and they are teaching students. Now, America has a huge, in any university in America, there's a large percentage of foreign exchange students. People come from all over the world to study at America's great universities. And we do have, in the technical departments, the hard science departments anyway, we've got some great learning that goes on here, great science, great engineering. So people come from all over the world to our universities. A tremendous percentage of every university's campus are exchange students or people here on foreign visas. If any of these, let me on one hand say, if any of these are agitators, they should have their visas revoked and they should be kicked out of the country. But they're
James,
not all cornered.
let's quickly get to the last super chat and try to get to the
Yeah,
no,
okay.
I'm not sure we can, but let's so Hannah, thank you for the super chat. She says, how do you take apart these systems? I mean, I think a big question, and I'm not sure we have the answer. I think it's a long process. The universities are there to stay. They have funding for pretty much forever.
Pull the
Uh,
federal funding. We can at least do
yeah,
that.
yeah, and of course, block countries that are not friendly from investing in the universities and in investing generally in universities.
Generally, yeah.
Um, all right, let's watch this clip, and then we might have a minute or two to comment about it, and the reality show might be a couple minutes late. Sorry about that, but
Sorry.
this is too good. This was going to be the whole episode. So wait, let me just set it up before you click play, Daniel. This is before the police came in. This is a student, leader of the protest, who took over that building, saying basically having a press conference. Let's listen to her.
Why should the university be obligated to provide food to people who've taken over a building?
Well, first of all, we're saying that they're obligated to provide food to students who pay for a meal plan here.
But you mentioned that there was a request that food and water be brought in, unless I misunderstood.
To allow it to be brought in. I mean, well, I guess it's ultimately a question of what kind of community and obligation Columbia feels it has to its students. Do you want students to die of dehydration and starvation or get severely ill, even if they disagree with you? If the answer is no, then you should allow basic, I mean, it's crazy to say because we're on an Ivy League campus, but this is like basic humanitarian aid we're asking for. Like, could people please have a glass of water?
But they did put themselves in that very deliberately, in that situation and in that position. So it seems like you're sort of saying, we want to be revolutionaries, we want to take over this building. Now would you please bring us food and water?
Nobody's asking them to bring anything. We're asking them to not violently stop us from bringing in basic humanitarian aid.
They're stopping the delivery of food?
We are looking for a commitment from them that they will not stop it
but
violently.
They haven't stopped it yet.
I don't know to what extent it has been attempted, but we're looking for a commitment.
And the Grubhub.
I mean, you can't make this shit up. Seriously. First of all,
so they want to commit suicide and blame it as murder, so that they violently seize control of the hall. They take over. Yeah. Okay, now make sure we get water and food. No, if y'all want to commit suicide, you can commit suicide. Okay, that's what it is. The minute you get thirsty, you can just walk out of the building, folks. No, it is not our obligation to fund, support, aid, and abet your violent protest. They do violence, mind you. They break windows. They hold janitors hostage. They're taking over, seizing control of someone else's building, and they say, "No, you got a right. You got to. In fact, we have a right." Basic humanitarian right to have food and water delivered to us as we're doing this. No, ma'am, you don't. And any suffering in there is your fault. And if you all want to commit suicide, go for it.
Daniel says here in the Zoom chat that they're taking inspiration from Hamas, and they definitely are, because
definitely,
that we send humanitarian aid, so-called humanitarian aid,
right,
to terrorists during a time of war is so ridiculous that the term humanitarian aid can now be applied to anything, including students who choose to break into a building, sit there, can go down the road and get water and food. You know,
the minute they're thirsty, they can leave the building.
I don't know if World Central Kitchen provides. I think the humanitarian aid there is provided by DoorDash or.
No, they wanted their protest to be subsidized, and supported by the. And by the way, weren't they getting all those signals from the president of Colombia? As she's letting all these things go by and not inviting the police in, she is morally sanctioning them. This gal was simply taking the moral sanction argument of President Shafiq to its logical conclusion, and the Hamas logic, you got to feed us, to its logical conclusion.
Yeah, and towards the end there, you hear her saying, "Well, we're expecting them not to block it," and somebody there saying nobody's blocking, and then she says, "Well, I don't know if it's being blocked or not." Well, then why are you even talking? I mean, what are you saying? So the only downside to NYPD finally taking action there is that we had a whole 30 minutes of this, and we had to fit it into the last 3 minutes of the show and push the reality show a few minutes back, but
Sorry.
it's still worth fitting in there. Thank you, James, for joining me. Thank you, everybody, for joining us. And we'll see you on the reality show. The reality show, we're going to talk about UCLA and how Jewish students are fighting back against the Nazis there. So we'll see you there in a couple of minutes. Thanks, James. We'll see you soon.
Be safe.